What's up? Hey folks, Jerry here. Welcome to the Pioneers of Insight podcast, a show that explores the wipeouts, crackups, and recoveries of inspiring and influential people. Here you'll get the stories of the quest to find success beyond the struggle and the great leaps of innovation that take us there. People that sound like this.
JLD. What's up,
Jerry.
What's up, man?
What's up, brother?
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm excited to be here, Jerry. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fun today.
Keep telling your story as well.
Yeah, man.
How you doing, man? So you got back from Greece?
I guess this morning I woke up at 4 a.m. You know, I'm not really like Jocko Willing, you know.
Today we deep dive the life story of Joel Carpenter, a man who left a promising career in Hollywood to become an Army Ranger after 9/11. All right, strap in, folks, and prepare to hear a story about loyalty and duty and a call to adventure overruled by a call to arms.
He looks at me like eye to eye, and then he'd like look down to my shoes, and so I'm just thinking in my mind, I'm like, are we supposed to go out to the parking lot?
Beautiful. Joel Carpenter, welcome to the Pioneers of Insight podcast. I'm happy to have you, man.
Jerry, thanks so much. I really appreciate the time that you're allotting to me to be on your show.
Imagine that there's a clone of Joel, like a perfect clone, meaning this Joel has your consciousness and all of that stuff. If that Joel was to follow you around, what would he see every day?
They're going to see an individual with a very focused vision. They're going to see an individual that is intensely engaged in pursuit of a destination. They're going to see a person of creativity and drive. There's kind of a culmination of different aspects and experiences from my life, and I kind of use those all with a very kind of succinct strategy, attempting to achieve that vision.
So there's a lot of things that you're carrying, and here's what I hear already. There's a number of identities. There's the warrior. You're saying creative person. So there's a living creative part of yourself that you're looking to exercise. And you talked originally about moving towards a destination. So somehow these things are coming together and you're seeing a destination, but you use the word a destination, meaning you didn't put a label on that destination. You didn't say what that looks like, which to me says a person that has an open mind to change along the way. Now, maybe I'm interjecting that, but that's how I'm making room for what you're saying, because there's the speaker, the producer, the consultant, there's the Army Ranger, which everybody, likely is a big part of your persona, which people kind of feel comfortable moving towards you because of, that identity. So you're showing up in the world as all these things. I totally buy that. That's part of the reason why I went after you. I said that before, is like, you're kind of a Renaissance man. And a number of the warriors I've interviewed are kind of that person. Like, you're integrating all these parts that don't seem to fit to other people. But to a warrior, actually, it may.
I think, you mentioned something in terms of a willingness to change. I think I'm always open for growth, like individual growth, and to become better and to never stop learning. I'm a husband, I'm a father, to be a better husband to my wife and to be a better father to my children, to always have that willingness to grow, because, I don't just think like, okay, I arrived and this is done. Until the day that I'm checked out, I'm here and I'm engaged. So I'm going to try to give the quote, the Army Ranger creed is 100% and then some. And that's just the way I think I'm built, like in my DNA.
So Joel Carpenter, a man working on a lot of levels. It sounds like you're integrating the warrior and utilizing the energy that comes with that in your pursuits and your other areas of your persona, which is the creative self too. Moving towards a destination, which I'm hearing you say, I'm molding myself as I go. So maybe the destination that I'm getting insight into with Joel Carpenter is you, the destination, is a better you, more than just, here's where I land, here's the X, and here's what I have and what I get. Does that sound right? I want to be fair to you.
Wow, it sounds great. No, this is almost like sitting down on the couch as well.
Well, I've had that said before, for sure. So here's Joel Carpenter, all of these things that we've talked about. Was there a low point where things were really difficult for you, that maybe you started to get a sense of where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I've had a great life. I was raised in a great family.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up everywhere. I was a military brat. I've lived all over. It was
Dad
born,
or mom?
Father, yeah.
Your dad, okay.
It definitely is different, I think, for military brat. For the obvious reason, you're, wherever you are, you're kind of on constant move, and you're put into different environments, different friends, taken away from these friends, put into this new place, and and that can, you think about the friends that you left in the States before, and then you come into the new school and you're getting in altercations, fights, people bullying, and so I think in that regard, I've always wanted to sit at the table, but I've always had to fight for that position at the table. I had I had two brothers, and there was three of us. We were all pretty close in age. I was the oldest, and at 4 years old, I wanted to go to school. Like most kids were anywhere from a year to 6 months older than I was. Looking back now, I look at that and I understand. I was very driven and kind of wanted to get into the mix, but at the same time, on being a little bit younger, I also happened to be, I think for my age, I also happened to be a late bloomer. So if you can imagine some of the resistance and maybe some of how I was formed throughout that process until I started catching up in terms of, growth and height and all that kind of stuff, which came much later, in high school and then college. I think a lot of how I was formed came from the moving around as a military brat, and then the things that I just mentioned.
So I hear a person that had an awareness from an early age. There was somewhere to go. You're talking about being a child in a military family. So you calling yourself a military brat. For those of you out there who are listening who don't know, that's basically the term for children that grow up in military families. So I'm hearing a Joel Carpenter that's, when I asked about your low, you're going back to a childhood experience that you're saying became a part of your character. And what I hear is a person had to get used to the concept of resistance pretty early and figure out where a connection lies, where the opportunity for it, and still succeed. So that was kind of like your family environment. Let me ask you a question about that. You're talking about being motivated from an early age. How much of your parents' parenting approach had something to do with that? Oftentimes the language of expectations look different. Did you find that was going on in your family?
I think for the most part, like my mother was, really supportive about pretty much anything that I showed a passion or interest in. And my father was pretty much the same. So I don't think he was maybe like the typical idea or vision of what people have of someone who's in the military. It's real no pressure.
Yeah, well, that's cool. So I'm hearing the parenting style was one that maybe gave you some freedom to express that now. That's for Joel. I hear that. What do you think that being exposed to that culture early on did for you? Because you're living two lives, and that's part of the character that we're hearing already. You introduce yourself as carrying all these, identities around. Well, there's two already that we're hearing as you talk about you're calling your low or your biggest challenge was as a kid is you're having to adapt a lot. So you're carrying around two identities. Well, here's one of being in a military family, and here's one of the public identity, right? Like with the kids in the school systems and things like that. What did that do for you? Did it find it change your perspective at all?
Oh, I think it changed my perspective for sure. And let me clarify, I don't necessarily, not the experience of being a military brat or adapting. I don't think that those things were lows as much as maybe when you arrive at a new school, a new location, and then you encounter conflict. For me, the lowest point probably when I was a child, when I was in third grade, my friend and I were almost kidnapped. Up until that point, I'd never really experienced anything that was outside of good. So we ran home, and it was like super traumatic. And then when we got there, like his mom, you know, had everybody jump in the car, his brothers and stuff. And then she got out a billy bat and she drove around looking for the guy that had, you know, tried to kidnap us. And that was a moment where I think that I recognized that there were, you know, people in the world that potentially can harm you. And so I think that was a moment where I was like, what is going on?
So here's the big picture that I get as you go backwards. It's hard for you to point to struggle. Like early on in your life, it sounds like things were on track. You were a kid that had a sense of self pretty early, meaning like you're motivated, right? You had a sense of direction. You had a family that was willing to give you some room and nurture you. It sounds like that's what you're saying. And the biggest challenge you're talking about is just what it's like to be in a military family. Maybe not the family aspect, but the adaptations that you're constantly having to make. Along the way, Joel gets bumped. You have this confrontation with life like, oh, shit, there's some monsters out here. So I hear, Joel, at an early age, you kind of got a wake-up call to maybe that uncomfortable part of life. Like, okay, there really maybe is monsters out there. You know, like I almost got captured by one. So the cage definitely got rattled. It's a memory. It's there.
No, I think that's an accurate assessment.
So comfortable life as a military child. You had one kind of like wake-up call moment. Is it from an early age exposed you kind of like what some would like to say evils of the world, something very uncomfortable. Where did things start to make sense for you? Because you're carrying around some identities that you've already told us about. There's a creative in you. And we also know, you know, spoiler alert, you're a U.S. Army Ranger.
I was in my third year of college, and just things weren't really going as planned. And, you know, my grades weren't that great. I was in El Paso, Texas, going to the university there. And I had kind of my whole life, I'd been interested in film and really like moved around a lot, and like film was a constant for me. So like all the classic films, I mean, you know, whether it's westerns or just, you know, love stories or, you know, war movies, whatever it was, just really loved those. And so I'd always had this fascination with film, and in fifth grade I shot a short film with like a video camera and then took it and premiered it at our school, and you know, big deal. You know, all the classes got to watch it, and it was like the first taste of, you know, creating something and then invoking emotion. It was supposed to be a war film, when it ended up being basically a comedy. But I saw how powerful film could be used as a medium. It was confirmation of the things that, you know, and I was already showing interest in. And so in my mind, I had said, okay, as soon as I turn 18, I'm going out to Hollywood and I'm going to get involved in film, because that was kind of what I was interested in. So 18 years old came, 19 came, 20 came, hadn't done it. And then I just, at that, you know, I was around 21 and close to, I was 20, getting ready to turn 21 within like 6 months or something. And I just said, you know what, I'm out. I finished that last spring semester, and I just said, I'm going to Hollywood. I packed my stuff over my car, and I went out and I trekked up to LA. And I think within a few short weeks, I had booked a music video, MTV music video, back when MTV was, you know, still big.
More music.
How do you do that? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, you're fresh out of college. You book over to Newport Beach to be close to Hollywood, and immediately, like, you're kind of in there.
It's just like everything else, you know. Maybe you said, like, it's all the experiences that add up. It's just for me to hop in the car and just say like, okay, I'm going here. And, I can remember my friends saying like, man, it takes so much guts. I can't believe you did that at that age. And I'm like, what did I do? I just got in my car, I put some gas in it, and like drove to LA,
Right.
And so when I got there, I went up to LA. There's
hold on. I'm sorry to totally screw up your flow, Joel, but I want to give you credit for what we're talking about. So there's an aspect of you that knows how to create momentum. Some people don't know how to do that. And also, we're hearing the mindset of Joel, which is perhaps the way that other people are looking at challenges, they don't register in the same way for you. You're just like, no, what are you talking about? I just do it, right? So there's a part of you that we're seeing that's being exposed. You give yourself permission to do things that other people don't.
It's a lot easier than people think. I think part of it is just getting out there. So whatever it is that you're doing, just show up, period. So I showed up, and, you find there's magazines and stuff. There was one at the time called Backstage. Now they're just strictly online. And you could go in there, and then you'd see ads in the back that said extra and this and that. And you kind of work your way up the chain. And I ended up meeting a guy who was a manager, agent, kind of starting out. And so he's also trying to develop his career. And so I worked with him initially, and they submitted me for a music video. At the time I had long kind of Point Break kind of surfer hair. And a buddy of mine, we drove up to Hollywood before we were going to go out that evening. I had the audition, and I was like the last guy for the day. They were already kind of like wrapping it up. They asked who I was and got my quick story, and they said, okay, well, we just need, you to look crazy. Give us a crazy look. I said, well, that's easy, and they got back then, nobody had smartphones or anything. They had the Polaroid, and they're like, okay, so just give us crazy. And so I said, okay. And I said, give me 1 second, and just thought of the craziest look I could have. And I happened to have just left El Paso, Texas, and had been in this big fight where 8 to 10 or more guys had jumped me in Juarez, Mexico. And so I think that craziness was still there. And I just kind of envisioned that. And then I just looked into the camera and just snapped a Polaroid. And I shook hands with the director and the producer, and that was it. And then it was a couple of days later, the agent called and they just said, hey, you got the part in the music video. And so that was the first thing, and for me. And I think that in terms of the vision for what I had when I was younger, I was okay, I want to be these two things. It's I want to be, an Army special not Army, but just special operations soldier, or I'd like to go the creative route and do acting and all that kind of stuff. And so here I was, and I was on set, and I'm overlooking kind of a portion. We were in this old hospital that had been shut down, and they were shooting the video, and there was a window, and I looked out the window, and I just kind of thought wow, this is cool. Here I am, and this is all kind of lining up.
We're getting a glimpse too with some of the backstory in this story, which is you make the leap out of college, and the part of you that's playing the loudest at that time is the creative, meaning I'm going to pursue this creative aspect of myself. So let's imagine there's 2 drums. There's one drum playing for spec ops and one for creative, and creative's playing the loudest at that point. But also I hear in your story, there's a rough man at that point in your life, I'm digging into a little bit of trouble, but like you said, things line up for you pretty quick. So where does it go next? What shows up? Is it a crack up? Is it a realization? Where do you start getting clarity that maybe the road that you're on isn't working?
So I moved out there in the summer of 1996, and everything was working fine. When you have to support yourself when you're out there. So most people support themselves by becoming waiters. That's a highly coveted job, and it's almost as hard as getting into law school. At least it used to be. Yeah. And so I stumbled into retail because I happened to know there's a big store that's popular with all celebrities and a bunch of people in fashion. It's called Fred Siegel. I happened to know his daughters from high school that happened to live in Texas from a split marriage. And so one of the daughters said, "Oh, we'll get you a job at the store. It's retail." And I was like, "Great, what's retail?" And she said, "Oh, you'll be perfect at it." And she's like, "You're just going to sell clothes to like actors and stuff." And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool, whatever. It's a job. And so that kind of gave me a pathway for supporting myself for the acting world. And I went on hundreds of auditions. Some of them were lead roles for some good movies. And so it was like, I always felt like I was like right on the cusp. And then after Good Will Hunting came out, there was Ben Affleck and Matt Damon had, written a screenplay. We were working on Rodeo Drive at the time. One of the guys I met, he was a screenwriter, and everybody else in Hollywood always says they're an actor. They're either an actor or a model. And like, it's like, "Oh, well, what do you do?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm a screenwriter." And I was like, "Wow, that's different. That's crazy." Yeah, I've kind of, written different stuff. And so we'd come up with a spec screenplay. And so the acting was going, as acting goes for an aspiring actor. But it just wasn't hitting, but I still felt like I was always on the cusp. And then we had come up, myself and a co-writer friend of mine, we came up with this great idea for the spec screenplay. And then through some friends that had worked at Fox and different stuff, it got tossed around and people had read it and there was major interest. And all of a sudden we went from aspiring actors and, the spec screenwriters working retail to support, themselves to pay rent and bills, to now we're having meetings with presidents of companies and like going to the 30-something floor in the Fox building. And it was just such a crazy thing. So now we're closer than ever. And so things are really going good. Everything changed for me when September 11th happened.
Let me slow you down because this is a really important point. And I think I'm hearing something in your story. It may sound a little far out there, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's interesting at 3 years, how old were you when you had that first encounter? You said third grade, right?
I was third grade, so I don't know, 8 or
yeah, because I'm
like
getting this sense to you, Joel, that you're in a flow with life and a flow with who you are. And you don't really get a sense of challenges the way others do. You see permission slips everywhere. Like, for instance, you're talking about in the second part of your life, you go to Hollywood, you're an actor automatically. You're just like giving yourself permission to do it. You start clicking in, you get in flow. And where other people would struggle, you're not seeing a struggle, meaning you're saying the message that you're giving yourself is, I'm on the cusp. I'm on the cusp. Now, having been a coach, therapist to a lot of different people, other people in that same scenario might go like, this isn't fucking happening. But you're going, I'm on the cusp. And you give yourself permission to take another leap automatically when you hear an opportunity. Screenwriter, boy, that sounds good. Boink, the leap's made immediately. You're not like, what do I need to do? How is this going to happen? Who do I need to talk to? You're just kind of giving yourself permission. Now, the story changes when you say 9/11 happens. It's kind of like the Joel earlier in life, meaning like, I'm just being who I am and things are going well because I'm in touch with who I am until the cage gets rattled, like something comes out of the blue. Your life path doesn't really change until those things starts to happen. So here you have your second kind of wake-up call, and it's a global wake-up call. It's one a lot of people heard. So you're on the path to being a screenwriter. 9/11 goes down. What happens next?
Everybody was in shock, obviously. I can remember just like driving, stuck in LA traffic, could hear people listening to news in their cars, and I was doing the same thing. And people were just kind of like hanging on their steering wheel. It was interesting. It was like Hollywood was just flooded with American flags. They had flags draped on fences. They had flags at some of the biggest Hollywood clubs. And everybody was just super patriotic. And I can remember at first everybody was talking about how, oh man, I'm going to join and I'm going to go do this and I'm going to do that. I just thought, okay, this happened, it's going to affect me for a couple of weeks and then probably just going to go away. But the feeling just kept not going away. And so I was like, man, I always kind of said like I would join the military. I came from a family of military grandfathers and all that kind of served, and my dad. And so I thought like, is this time? I just couldn't go out and have fun. My focus was completely shifted and now was completely on basically joining, had this constant vision of people falling on the building. And then myself and two friends, a guy and a girl, were walking in Santa Monica on 3rd Street Promenade. There's a magazine stand, and like one of the magazine stands was like a Newsweek, and it had like a special operations guy, and the title at the time it had across it said like Spec Ops or something like that. And like I stopped and I flipped through, and before I'd even realized it, they were kind of standing around me, and I just said, I'm gonna go become a special operations soldier. And it just kind of came out, and the girl and the guy like looked at me and they were like, whoa. And the girl had said, she goes, do it, Joel. She goes, you can do it. You can do it. So there were several weeks where I really had thought about this, and I was very careful. I went back to film and I watched 2 movies to see if I watched these movies and I still had a desire to join. So I'd watched Full Metal Jacket, and then I'd watched Born on the 4th of July.
There's something happening here. You gotta try and stay alive, okay? You hear me?
I wanted to kind of get 2 perspectives, which was just starting out and then also post, like what kind of, other than death, what a worst case scenario could look like, you know, if you come back paralyzed. Yeah, obviously those are 2 tremendous films. And so I watched both of those, and I kind of just said like, okay, if you watch these and you still have a desire at all to enlist after this, then maybe like, yeah, definitely we should change path, you know, pivot, and then go and do this.
I'm hearing a couple things in this part, which is exposing more about you, Joel, which is you make this leap. The drum that's beating the loudest is the creative leap. You're all in. That's the only speed I'm getting a sense that Joel has, is like all in. The cage gets rattled, 9/11 happens, and you step into this opportunity. But it's kind of like the way that you've engaged your other challenges. You just immediately gave yourself permission. But with this one, we're seeing a little bit more of who you are. On the other end of it, you said, well, I'm going to slow it down rather than just jump right in. I'm going to rely on my resources as a person and make sure that as I move forward, that I get a full picture of what this means. I hear a part of you that's doing it for yourself, but I also hear service. Like the servant in you gets woken up, but it's a servant that wants the full picture, not just the happy picture, not just the one-sided picture of what a soldier can do. You're going, okay, what's the consequences at the same time? So that shows some depth of character to do that, to pivot like that, and to inform your decision. All right, so you weigh the consequences, utilizing your resources, your creative resources, meaning you bring some films in to kind of get a bigger sense of the risk to self and what it means to be a soldier. And you move forward, right?
Yeah, definitely. Enlisted, got a Ranger contract, spoke to all the different branches of military, and ultimately felt like 75th Ranger Regiment was the direction that I wanted to go. Signed the papers and had a delayed entry, ended up going that spring.
So there's Joel, the creative, on his way to become a Spec Ops operator, simply because you gave yourself permission, and the wake-up call was 9/11. You said you started to get a sense of what you wanted to do when you clicked into Hollywood, into the actor in the creative role. What did it look like for you to kind of get comfortable with that role? Or did you? Or was it somewhere in between? Was there gray? What did it look like for you?
I look back now and I'm like, okay, yeah, that was definitely an awesome decision. It was a great experience. And but it definitely changed things. So I think that there's a lot of different things that would have happened, and it would have been a different version of me today. Like, I have my wife and children today because the decision that I made to enlist. I mean, that wouldn't have ended up that way. So it definitely diluted who I was and what I was pursuing in terms of the creative side of creative aspirations. That ended temporarily, at least. And then I moved into this other side where I was very comfortable. I loved playing, war when I was a kid, and I spent countless hours out in the woods and digging foxholes and all this kind of stuff. So there was that element of me that loved being a soldier. It was just that the idea that people have what it means to be a soldier, there's a lot of things you don't think about, like that suck, whether it's being cold, being hungry, sleep deprived, losing buddies, people being killed, all this kind of things.
Pain.
Running in the movies, it looks real cool and everything,
Yeah,
but when you start running with equipment in real life, like you find out like within the first 20 seconds, really, it's brutal, and you're just like, totally smoked, dry heaving, and so those things they never show you in the movies. Everybody just seems to have amazing energy and stamina. So those things I was quickly recognized. Overall, it was just, I think, accepting and saying I'm putting this on hold and I'm going in this other direction. And for me, it was like an obligation. I felt compelled to do this, even though it wasn't what I was pursuing.
Well, I also hear another aspect of you that's showing up as you clarify that, which is, and I've been alluding to it throughout the interview, is, Joel, you have the ability to give yourself permission, to step into challenges, but also to click in. You're all there when you do. And you know what I'm talking about. To be able to maintain a connection to what you're doing in something as difficult as what you're talking about takes a certain level of inner commitment and discipline. So you have that, and it's been showing up in your life in a lot of different ways. So Joel, you're a creative warrior now, and you've talked about how you got into flow with both of those things. Where do these two things start to come together in terms of your life? Is there a flow for both of those things to exist for you now?
It's funny because I can identify exactly when those things came together. So when I exited the military, I had a short stint of private sector jobs. So one of them was as a loan officer, and then new home sales manager for a national builder. And then in 2008, I had gone to become a government contractor, protective specialist. And so I went to work for one of the big private military contractors overseas, and that was great money. So you're financially stable. You're away from your family. It's a big negative. Started in 2008, you come back and you go back. So, you're constantly deploying and redeploying. And then it was 2011, and there was a guy that I had known, I went to high school with, and he was a musician. He was still pursuing music, and he had a couple of his songs that were on some of these shows on some of the networks. And I remember thinking wow, yeah, I remember those days, at the creative aspect. And I hadn't really done anything since I got out of the military. I was writing, and so the creative part of me took a backseat, and everything was transactional. It was and so in 2011, I came across an intellectual property. Basically, that was the catalyst that got me re-engaged back into the creative world. We went out and we optioned the intellectual property rights to this true story, and here I was. Now I'm doing those two things, those are merged.
So I hear the military experience ended up being the key that allowed you to really kind of express your creative self. And what I hear in your story is that all happened because of the wake-up call. You coming around to that, those two things converging and serving each other happened because of that moment in time for you. And you were willing to make that leap as a warrior. Does that sound right? I mean, that's how I'm putting the big story arc.
Yeah.
We were writing
I think it's pretty accurate. I mean, there was a moment where the gentleman, people can go look him up, he's pretty known actually, is a gentleman named Nate Self. He was an Army Ranger also from 1st Ranger Battalion, fought the ground force commander in a battle called Conquer Dar.
Captain Self leads 10 Rangers in the first helicopter, Razor 1.
As we neared the mountain, I expected...
and him and I were working together on a film version of that, going back to even before American Sniper had come out. And it was a really weird thing for me. We had some, meetings at some production offices, and we'd gone out to Hollywood. And so Nate and his wife were there. We were in Beverly Hills, and we're having meetings about the film, about the Battle of Trafalgar. And I'm showing them like, hey, yeah, I used to work here, and this is where I used to go on auditions. And it was such a weird kind of like surreal,
right,
like just, full circle kind of moment.
Yeah, that's your transition point. That was where the leap happened. All right, so here you are, a creative who's integrated the Warrior. You're out there, you're speaking, you're producing, you have your hands in Hollywood now a little bit. The creative Joel's got more room to express himself and grow. Where do you see yourself going?
I think in regards to for the future for me, I would like to pull back out of, the risk management kind of crisis management world and focus more on the creative, have, more time with my family. I really want to get to a point in terms of credibility of putting out a great product as a producer. I'm an independent producer now. It's strange because I don't have an agent, I don't have a manager, but I've established relationships with some of the biggest film studios. I have this open dialogue with them because they've looked at a number of my projects, and they always seem to be intrigued with the stories that I find in the projects that I'm working on. And so once again, I'm kind of in this space where I'm on the cusp once again, and I've established a solid network. And I think, when I align that network up with a particular content that's desirable, then hopefully, that will bring a successful outcome.
All right. So you have kids. You've been talking about your family, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many children do you have?
3.
So let's say it's 20 years from now, and your 3 kids walk in the door, but they're not kids anymore. They're adults, and they have their own kids. So you're grandpa now. And let's say you're going over a spec script. They walk in the door, and they interrupt your work, and you're gracious, of course, because you're Joel Carpenter, and that's who you are. They say, Grandpa, we've been hearing a lot about success, but we have no idea what the heck that means. What would you tell your grandkids?
I happen to be a Christian. My wife and my kids, my friends, those things, is happiness with those individuals and being with those individuals. It's just not like chasing Hollywood. It could be Hollywood, it could be any endeavor, but it's about relationships with people. It's about building relationships. And at the end of the day, having a legacy to pass on to future generations where they can look to you and say, like, that guy he really pushed the limits. He gave it all he could, and he never gave up. But he was also a wonderful husband. He was a wonderful father. He was a great friend. And that would be success for me.
Joel Carpenter, thanks so much for being on the show today. It was an honor.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate you.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to. This just helps put it in the hands of the people likely to get something out of it. If you'd like to dig a little deeper and see what we got cooking here at TOOWi Media, you can visit our website at TOOWiMedia.com. Wishing you grace to fill your sails today. Stay great in the meantime, and I'll see you on the next Pioneers of Insight.
Done. Everything changed for me when September 11th happened.